Hey folks, since we have performed some basic stats and some basic analysis on top of our data, so let's go ahead and try to do some basic feature engineering on top of our core data set. Again, in this session, our fun challenge is all about, let's try to find a frequency of our question IDs that we have. But first and foremost, let's try to read the data. So very first, you have to import all the necessary modules. I'm going to say import pandas as PD. Then I can think of my numpy, which is extremely used in case of numerical stuff like calculating mean, median, standard deviation, and lot of other functions. Similarly, for visualization, you can think of matplotlib, which is nothing but a base module for my visualization. For interactive visualizations, you can think for your Seaborn, your Plotly, your Bokeh, your Altair, lot of other modules. So let's try to execute it using Alt plus Enter. Now, first and foremost, let's try to read the data. So I will say read_csv. Now here we have to just mention the file path where exactly my data is available. So I will say this is all about my file path. Let me say it is train.csv, and let me append R, which is all about my raw string that helps Python or that helps pandas just to read file very efficiently. Because again, the moment I press Shift plus Tab over here, this is all about the signature of the function. The very first parameter says, hey, what is the file path? And again, this is all about my file path, and train.csv is my file name. So it will typically return a data frame object. Let me store that object that's in df. Let me execute this line of code using Alt plus Enter. Now, if I will call, let's say, head on top of this, just to showcase, let's say the first three values. Let me execute this line of code. So this is typically the high level overview of our data frame. Now let's try to check whether we have null values in our data or not. So we will say df.isNull. The moment I call some function on top of this, it says, hey, you have just missing values in two feature, which is all about question 1 and question 2. Now let's try to fill all the missing values. So I can call inbuilt function, which is all about fill NA, just to fill all the NA values in my data frame. It says, its signature or its documentation says, hey, to what value you have to fill all the missing values that we have. I will say cool. Let's try to fill it. And let's try to update the data frame. Let me show you one more thing. The moment I will press Shift plus Tab again over here. So again, I have pressed Shift plus Tab. Here we have a parameter as in place. Let me go through that. So typically what it says is, it says by default it is false. If I will customize it to true, it will fill in place, and of course this will modify the existing views of this object. Again, so I will say in place equals to true. So I will say in place equals to true. Cool. The moment I will execute, and if I will just copy all blocks of code, the moment I will again execute, you will end up getting 0 missing values across the feature that you have. So if I will say df.columns, let me execute. These are all the columns that we have. Now, what we need to do is, we need to find the frequency of the question ID that we have. Let me say as, let's say df of head of, let's say 20. Let me execute. So these are typically the first 20 observations that we have. So frequency of the question ID basically means how many times this question ID 1 is available in the entire data that we have. Similarly, how many times this question ID 3 is available in this entire data. Similarly, how many times this 5 is available in this entire data. Hey, can you find all this stuff? So if I will say, let me remove all this stuff. I will say df of, let's say QID1. Let me execute. These are all the values. So let me very first create a copy of the data frame, so that whatever manipulation or whatever featureization or whatever feature extraction I will do on top of this data instead of df. Let me execute. So if I will say data of QID, let me press tab, QID1. These are all the values that we have. So just to find how many times, let's say this 1 is appear, how many times this 3 got appear in the entire data. What I will do is, I will say, hey, cool, can you group your data? considering your QID1 feature. Can you group this? The moment I will call group by on top of this, then I can say, hey, considering this feature, just call a count inbuilt function. Just call a count inbuilt function and you are done. Of course, just to make things more clear, we can think of calling transform on top of that. So we will say data.groupBy. We have to just group our data considering this QID1 feature. Then we have to again access this. On top of this, I will say just transform it considering your count function. That's what I have explained you. Let me execute this line of code. And congratulations, this is what you are getting. It says here, this QID1, where my QID1 is 1, it has a count as 1 times. Similarly, where my QID is 3, it has a count as 4 times. Similarly, if my QID1 is 5, it got repeated just once, or it has a count of 1. But if I have a QID of 18840, it got repeated 12 times. That's what I will end up getting. Now what we need to do is, let's try to store this all the stuff. Let's say in some new feature. Let's try to store that. So I will say, let's say data of frequency. Let's say data of frequency underscore QID1. Let me execute. Let's try to do the similar stuff with respect to QID2. Let me show you why. So if I will say data of QID of 2, let me execute. These are again the IDs that we are getting is with respect to quotient ID 2. Now again, we need to perform the similar stuff but with respect to QID feature. So let's try to customize it. So we will say it is QID2, and of course it is also QID2 because we have to store it in a frequency underscore QID2 feature. Let's try to execute, and if I will say data.columns again, let me execute. Now you will end up getting 2 more features, which is all about frequency ID1 and frequency ID2. I will say data.head. Let me pass some value, let's say 4. Let me execute. Now here you can see you will end up getting 2 new features, which is all about frequency underscore ID1 and frequency underscore ID2. This is what we have done till now. We have performed feature extraction. Of course, we have considered QID1 and QID2 just to extract 2 new features, which is all about frequency underscore ID1 and frequency underscore ID2. That's what we have done in this session. Again, for those of you who have any doubts, who have any issues with respect to the code, whatever we have written, feel free to ask your doubts in the Q&A of the course. That's all about it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Keep learning, keep growing, keep practicing.